Throughout history, many notorious serial killers have wreaked havoc in communities, states, and even countries. Some examples are the likes of Pedro Lopez, a Colombian child rapist and murderer in the 1970s, Javid Iqbal, another child rapist and murderer from Pakistan in 1998 and 99, and Mikhail Popkov, a serial killer from Russia. However, none of them were as dangerous as Luis Garravito, also known as La Bestia, as he was known in his home country of Colombia. He raped and murdered 140 boys, but is rumored to have murdered more like 300 or more.
Abused both sexually and physically by his father as well as several neighbors. On top of this, he never really completed school, attending it for only 5 years. When Luis did go to school, he was bullied by the other children for being socially awkward. He did not have a healthy childhood, to say the least. Luis's childhood abuse played a large role in the violent behavior seen in his later life. Being raped as a child is a factor that led him to the malicious sexual crimes he committed. He was also known to have a history of abusing alcohol, which can be linked to his aggression.
Luis Garravito's education was limited to say the least. As mentioned earlier, he only had 5 years of schooling in his early life, so he obviously did not attend college. In his adulthood, he never held a steady job, so he drifted from one job to another, often working as a peddler on the streets. This is how he came across the majority of his victims. During his time, he would move from town to town. When he was kicked out of one, he simply moved on to the next and continued his malevolent ways. Due to the horrific acts committed by Luis Garravito, it is hard to believe that he was never officially diagnosed with a mental disorder. However, this could have to do with the poor availability to medical treatment and diagnosis in Colombia. So, it is suspected that there was something mentally abnormal going on. Adding to this theory is that Luis had attempted suicide once and was under psychiatric care for 5 years. This leads to the suspicion that he suffers from an antisocial personality disorder. This disorder could be a result of his abuse as a child, which led to withdrawal from social interactions as an adult. Furthermore, this disorder could be linked to the horrible rapes and murders he committed. He likely found consolation through his actions as a way to fill the lack of social interaction in his life. While peddling through towns, Garravito would offer young boys between the ages of 8 and 16 juice or cake from a local shop, and then he would ask them to do him a favor. He would then bribe them with money or some other desirable goods to lure them away from town, where he would then brutally rape and murder them. During these murders, Garravito would often use a knife and screwdriver to brutally murder these boys. However, these disgusting crimes couldn't go unnoticed forever.
On April 22, 1999, Luis Garravito was caught abusing a young boy by a homeless man who was watching from a nearby bush. This homeless man then reported Luis to authorities. Later that day, Luis was caught by a taxi driver, and when questioned, he had a very poor alibi. This led to his arrest, and he cooperated well with authorities, pleading guilty to his many counts of murder. Luis even showed where he'd hidden the victims' bodies in order to decrease his sentence. Luis was found to have a very mild mental disorder called antisocial personality disorder. However, this did not actually affect his ability to withstand trial. Luis Garravito ended up being found guilty of 138 of the 172 cases, and for this he was sentenced to 1,853 years in jail. However, Colombian laws limited his sentence down to just a mere 30 years, which was then reduced to only 22 after he helped locate the victims' bodies. Garravito is still alive to this day, serving his prison sentence. Because of the Colombian laws, which limited Garravito's sentence to only 30 years, he is expected to be released in 2021, despite the awful crimes he committed.
Through Luis Garravito's heinous acts against humanity, he has firmly placed himself as the deadliest serial killer of all time, and it is terrifying that he is going to be released from prison next year, regardless of the number of children he brutally raped and murdered. This is a clear flaw in the Colombian justice system, and we can only hope that his time in prison has somehow reformed into enough to be a functioning member of society, to walk the streets a normal citizen.
To wrap things up, we have a little game of trivia for you to play. Here's the question. Was Luis Garravito A. sentenced to 45 years in jail, B. sentenced to 1,853 years in jail, C. sentenced to 30 years in jail, or D. sentenced to 172 years in jail? If you guessed option C, you'd be correct. For the next trivia question, I want you to think back to when I mentioned who abused Garravito as a young child. Was it A, his father, B, his mother, C, his neighbors, or D, his teachers? The correct answer for this question was actually both A and C.